Good morning, everyone. Please take your seats and get ready for the plenary. Good morning, delegates. I hope you managed to get some rest after a busy day yesterday and had some good Thai food. We are well ahead of the schedule and we really would like to keep it that way. So today we will consider the remaining items of the agenda of the preparatory segment. And before we move on the consideration of those remaining items, we will begin with the morning session by hearing back from the contact groups that met yesterday. Budget committee met yesterday and we will continue with their discussions throughout the week. But before I hand over the floor to co-chairs and co-conveners of the contact groups, I would like to inform that we are really looking for co-chairs or co-conveners from A5 parties. And if we do approach you, please do not say no. And I would really also like to thank those who have already agreed from A2 and A5 parties. And we hope that nobody would say no. And then we could continue finding the co-chairs and co-conveners for the contact groups. And for the contact groups reporting back, first I would like to give the floor to Michelle from Canada to report on the contact group on feedstock. Yes, shall we have the floor?
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. I would like to report for the work of the contact group on feedstock that took place yesterday evening. The contact group made modest progress on the draft CRP. However, there was a willingness to engage by many parties. So I believe that there's a good opportunity to continue this work. So I would ask the co-chair if it'd be possible to have additional time at this meeting this week. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And now I would like to give the floor to Alessandra from Italy or Liana from Armenia to report back from the contact group on atmospheric monitoring. Yes. Alessandro?
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. Good morning, colleagues. Yes, this morning we had our first contact group. We made some progress in relation to the initial review of the draft CRP. But of course, we haven't finalized our work and we need additional time and for conclude it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We will indicate the time for these two contact groups later on. And with that, now I would like to hand over to my co-chair.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you, Mirusa. And what Mirusa just said on, let's say, the approaching co-conveners, who can say no to Mirusa on that? So I would like to go then to the Halon's contact group that met also yesterday evening. I don't know who is going to report back, but I see the US. So Andrew, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Yes, the Halon Contact Group met in the final session of the evening last night. A number of parties had come to the meeting since the OEWG with some new reflections on the CRP, so we did have a couple of new ideas introduced for the parties to consider, but we did make some modest progress through the text. We would like to have some more time to continue going through the CRP, so I do request that you can provide that for us, Mr. Co-Chair, but if it's, we would be perfectly fine if it were not the final session of the evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for reporting back and the progress you made, and there will be a time slot, let's say this day or the next day. So, and I also would like to urge, make use of the time in the contact group as efficiently as possible. I think there's a lot of good progress, and I think we are close to get to good decisions to be forwarded to the high level. Now I would like to go to the agenda, to agenda item 4N on the compliance and data reporting issues, the work and the recommendations of the implementation committee. The President of the Implementation Committee will present his report on compliance issues that were discussed at the 72nd meeting of the committee, held on the 7th of July 2024, and the 73rd meeting, which was convened on the 25th of October 2024, so right before this MOP. Any draft decisions arising from those meetings of the committee will be presented by the President for our consideration and for possible forwarding for adoption at the high-level segment. It's my pleasure to invite Mr. Osvaldo Alvarez Perez, President of the Implementation Committee, to take the floor for your report and presentation of the draft decisions. Please. Chile. Yeah.
Gracias, señor.
Thank you, Co-Chair. I have a rather lengthy presentation to deliver. And when I translated it into Spanish, it became even more lengthy. So I will try to be as brief as I possibly can. I will do it both in English and in Spanish.
Distinguished delegates, I am pleased to present a summary of the work of the Implementation Committee at its 72nd and 73rd meetings, which took place on 7th July 2024 in Montreal and 25th October 2024 in Bangkok. The report of the 72nd meeting is available on the Secretariat's meeting portal, while the one for the 73rd will be made available on the portal in due course. This year, the committee considered data reporting issues related to Articles 7 and 9 of the Montreal Protocol, including the reporting requirements for HFCs under the Kigali Amendment, cases of non-compliance, including adherence or non-adherence by individual parties to commitments in their plans of action to return to compliance, requests for changes to baseline data for HFCs, information on the establishment of licensing systems for HFCs, and the submission of provisional data in the context of Article 7 reporting. Similar to past years, the committee also heard reports from the Multilateral Fund Secretariat on relevant decisions of the Fund's Executive Committee and on activities carried out by the implementing agencies to facilitate parties' compliance at its 2 meetings. While reviewing the status of parties covered by last year's MOP decision on non-compliance with Article 7 data reporting obligations, the committee considered the status of compliance of 4 parties, and all 4 have reported the outstanding data as requested in the decision. The committee also considered the commitments contained in plans of actions to return to compliance with 3 parties: the Democratic People's Republic of Korea still has an issue with its 2021 data, and I will get back to this situation shortly. Kazakhstan and Libya continue to adhere to their commitments in decisions outlining their plans for returning to compliance. I want to draw the parties' attention to Conference Room Paper 1, available on the meeting portal in all UN languages under the In-Session Documents tab, through which the Implementation Committee is forwarding 4 draft decisions for the 36th meeting of the parties to consider. The first draft decision relates to data reporting under Article 7 of the Protocol. It notes with appreciation that as of today, 192 of the 198 parties to the Montreal Protocol have reported data for 2023, and that 163 of those parties have reported their data by 30th September 2024, as required under paragraph 3 of Article 7 of the Protocol. This draft decision further notes with appreciation that 80 of those parties reported their data for 2023 by 30th of June 2024, as encouraged in Decision 1515. Such reporting greatly facilitates the work of the Implementation Committee and the Executive Committee of the Multilateral Fund in assisting Article 5 parties in complying with the control measures. It is noted with concern that 6 parties, namely Azerbaijan, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, Djibouti, Iceland, Mali, and San Marino, have not yet reported their 2023 data. This situation places them in non-compliance with their data reporting obligations under the Montreal Protocol until the Secretariat receives their outstanding data. In the same draft decision, it is also noted with concern that one Article 5 party, Djibouti, which has ratified the Kigali Amendment to the Montreal Protocol, should have submitted baseline data for HFCs for the years 2020 to 2022 rather, but has not done so. This situation places this party in non-compliance with its data reporting obligations under the Montreal Protocol until the Secretariat receives the outstanding baseline data for HFCs. It is further noted with concern that two Article 5 parties, namely Côte d'Ivoire and Guinea, that have ratified the Kigali Amendment to the Montreal Protocol and should have submitted data for HFCs for the years 2023, submitted data for other controlled substances, but not for HFCs, which also places them in non-compliance with their data reporting obligations for HFCs under the Montreal Protocol until such time when the Secretariat receives their outstanding data. This draft decision also urges the parties mentioned to report their data as soon as possible and requests that the Implementation Committee review their situation at its 74th meeting. This draft decision also encourages parties to continue reporting their data on consumption and production of controlled substances as soon as the figures becomes available, preferably by 30th of June each year, as encouraged in Decision 1515. I wish to note that the data reporting status of the parties mentioned in the draft decision may change between now and the adoption of the decision on Friday, as the Secretariat may receive the outstanding data reports from the parties mentioned by then. When agreeing to forward the draft decision to MOP 36, the committee authorized the Secretariat to continue to update the status of data reporting by parties until the point when the draft decision is tabled for adoption by MOP 36 to ensure that the decision accurately reflects the latest data reporting status of the parties with this requirement. Distinguidos delegados.
Distinguished delegates, the second draft decision concerns non-compliance of the Democratic People's Republics of Korea with its HCFC production and consumption commitments for 2021. More specifically, the proposed decision notes with concern that the Democratic People's Republic of Korea did not strictly adhere to its commitments for 2021 as set out in its plan of action to return to compliance contained in Decision 32.6, and that the party was in non-compliance with the consumption control measures for that substance under the Montreal Protocol for 2021. The draft decision expresses serious concern that DPRK has not yet provided an explanation for these deviations or a revised plan of action as appropriate, despite several requests by the Implementation Committee at its 68th, 69th, 70th, 71st, and 72nd meetings, and after repeated reminders by the Secretariat. Additionally, the party has not submitted a progress report to establish additional national policies to facilitate HCFC phase-out, despite the request to do so, if appropriate, as contained in Decision 3518. The draft decision further notes that the Democratic People's Republic of Korea has not reported its Article 7 data for 2023. This means that the party will not comply with its data reporting obligations until the Secretariat receives this outstanding data. The decision urges the party to explain these deviations together with Article 7 data for 2033 and, where appropriate, to submit a revised plan of action for consideration by the Implementation Committee at its 74th meeting. The party is also requested to submit its progress reports on efforts to establish additional national policies facilitating HCFC phase-out. The draft decision also invites the Democratic People's Republic of Korea to send a representative to the committee's 74th meeting unless the party provides the required information before said meeting. The draft decision also cautions DPRK in accordance with item B of the indicative list of measures that may be taken by the meeting of the parties in respect of non-compliance, and requests the Implementation Committee to continue to monitor closely the progress made by the party in implementing its plan of action and obligations under the Montreal Protocol. Let me point out now that the committee has already recommended the relevant meetings of the parties on 5 different occasions in cases of non-compliance in the case of DPRK. And the MOPs have also adopted 2 decisions, one in 2020 and the other decision in 2023.
Distinguished delegates, the third draft decision relates to establishing licensing systems for HFCs under Article 4B, Paragraph 2 bis of the Montreal Protocol. The draft decision notes with appreciation that 154 of the 160 parties that have ratified the Kigali Amendment have established such licensing systems. Moreover, 5 parties that have not yet ratified the Kigali Amendment have also reported establishing and implementing such licensing systems. The draft decision urges Angola, Kenya, and San Marino that have ratified the Kigali Amendment but have not reported on establishing their licensing system to the Secretariat to provide the information on the establishment and implementation of such a system for consideration by the Implementation Committee at its 74th meeting. All remaining parties that ratified the Kigali Amendment are also urged to establish and implement their licensing systems if necessary and report that information to the Secretariat within 3 months. As with the draft decision relating to reporting under Article 7 of the Protocol, the status of parties about establishing a licensing system for HFCs may change between now and the adoption of the decision on Friday, as the Secretariat may receive such reports from parties by then. The committee, in agreeing to forward the draft decision on licensing systems to the MOP 36, has authorized the Secretariat to continue updating the list until the consideration of the decision for adoption by the MOP to ensure that the decision accurately reflects the latest information on the status of compliance with its requirement. Distinguidos delegados.
Distinguished delegates, the 4th draft decision concerns El Salvador and Honduras's requests to revise baseline data. The draft decision notes that Decision 1315 advised parties that request changes in reported baseline data for base years to present their request before the Implementation Committee. It also notes that Decision 1519 outlines the methodology for submitting such requests. The draft decision confirmed that El Salvador and Honduras had presented sufficient information as per Decision 1519 to justify their requests to revise their consumption data for HFCs for all or some years of 2020, 2021, and 2022, which are the HFC baseline years. Therefore, the draft decision approves the parties' request to revise their consumption data for HFCs for the requested baseline years. I invite the parties to consult CRP 1, which contains the full text of the 4 draft decisions for your consideration. And after a thorough review, the committee also considered the requests for changes of baseline data of 10 other parties: Armenia, Cook Islands, Kiribati, Liberia, Marshall Islands, Nauru, Nigeria, Niue, Tuvalu, and Vanuatu. The committee concluded that the information submitted was insufficient for it to approve the changes requested by the parties. The committee therefore asked the parties to submit to the Secretariat the outstanding information needed to meet the requirements of Decision 1519 in support of their request for the revision of baseline data for future consideration by the committee.
Distinguished delegates, I would also like to draw the party's attention to the issue of submission of provisional data in the context of Article 7 reporting, which was brought to the attention of the committee by the Secretariat during its 72nd meeting. At that session, the committee requested the Secretariat to prepare a document with an analysis of trends in submitting provisional data, together with any previous discussions and decisions of the committee on the matter and any other relevant information. Members of the committee discussed this document during the 73rd meeting. The oldest recorded case of a party submitting provisional data is from 2005, regarding data for the year 2004. But the Secretariat informed the committee that the practice is much older than that. Since 2019, when the new online reporting system launched, 67 cases of data reported as provisional has been identified from 38 parties, almost 1/5 of parties. 40 of those 67 cases pertain to baseline years. Parties have indicated their data was provisional in emails or through a checkbox in the outline reporting system since 2019. Let me point out that this practice has increased during the last few years, and some parties have subsequently informed the Secretariat that the data previously submitted should be considered provisional. The Implementation Committee has been informed that after receiving provisional data from a party, the Secretariat follows up and requests confirmation from the party that the data is final or that the final data should be submitted as soon as possible. This is done several times a year. However, sometimes some of the data remains provisional for years. The submission of provisional data challenges the work of the Implementation Committee regarding potential non-compliance, because without final data, it is impossible to ascertain compliance with the control measures under the Montreal Protocol. Additionally, and this is quite serious, a party that submits provisional data for baseline years could circumvent the process to revise baseline data under Decision 1315. The Implementation Committee discussed this matter and appreciated that the Secretariat intends to do the following in response to the committee's discussion. A, delete the checkbox from the online reporting system that allows a party to indicate that the data submitted was provisional. And I have to stop here to say that after the Implementation Committee meeting last Friday, I realized that the Secretariat has removed the checkbox from the online reporting system. And B, if parties persist in submitting Article 7 data as provisional, the Secretariat will question the party why it is submitting such data and will submit the data and other related information from the party to the Implementation Committee for its consideration. Estimados delegados,
Distinguished delegates, I would like to take this opportunity to thank my colleague from the Netherlands, who acted as Vice President during the 72nd and 73rd sessions. I have to say that it was a good match of technical and legal knowledge, as we come from different state agencies in our respective countries. To all the members, old and new, my thanks for their constructive engagement and support, truly contributing to the progress achieved over the last 2 years to the successful operation of the compliance mechanism of the Montreal Protocol. To the Ozone Secretariat, thanks for the timely support and capacity to act at the last minute to conclude the meeting successfully. Innuendo says, I have presided over the most extended IMPCOM meetings recently. That may be true. However, that fact, the length of time of the last 2 sessions, I think only outlines how much the agenda has been enlarged with general compliance issues, making the committee's work even more relevant, and perhaps I could also say even more exciting. Lastly, allow me to thank my regional group for selecting me to be a member of the Implementation Committee, and my thanks to the parties that elected me last year in Nairobi to serve as president of the IMPCOM during the last 2 sessions, 72nd and 73rd. It has been an immense privilege. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Osvaldo, for your comprehensive presentation. And also, on behalf of the parties, I would like to extend sincere gratitude to you and the members of the MCOM for all the excellent work and dedication. And indeed, it has been more work than normally in the last year. So thank you. I now would like to open the floor for interventions. And I look at the list. It's empty yet. Granada, first one. And please indicate if you would like to speak, because that makes my life easier. Thank you. Grenada, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Co-Chair. And I would like to say, since that this is the first time that I'm actually speaking in this meeting, again, I would want to, like others before me, thank the Ozone Secretariat for the excellent arrangements for eventually getting me here to this meeting, and also to the government of Thailand for the warm hospitality that has been presented thus far. Mr. Co-Chair, I would just like to make a brief intervention with regards to the report that has been presented by the esteemed President of the IMCOM, and to speak in particular reference to the issue that was raised about the provisional data that has been presented. While I do express equal concerns with the increased number of entries for provisional data, and while I do also understand the administrative issues it can cause for the Secretariat, I still do believe that when this tab or when this facility was created, it was for a particular reason. And whereas some countries may have, for want of a better expression, overused or abused this facility, I believe there are other parties that can still benefit from this facility for reasons that they may have at the national level in finalizing and verifying data. What I also do have some concern about is the manner in which the tab, as was indicated by the President, was removed from the online reporting mechanism or portal. I recall when this online mechanism was developed, there was consultations within network meetings with parties as to how it can be best suited for the parties. And so it was my expectation that if something like that was to be removed, that maybe consideration could have been given to go back to the network meetings with parties, explain the situation at hand and the concerns that have been raised by the dear President, and to see what resolution can be achieved before a decision was taken at that level to remove the tab. Because obviously there are some countries that will still rely on this mechanism. Notwithstanding, an email message could be sent, but it might be easier for some countries just to tick that box to indicate that the data that they have submitted is on a provisional basis. So I look forward to see whether or not further engagements can be had with parties on this issue to see how we can maybe find a better solution rather than just removing the tab from the online reporting mechanism. Because as I mentioned, there are some parties that will have situations at the national level that will require them to report data on a provisional basis. Thank you very much, Mr. Co-Chair.
Thank you, Grenada. Then I have Kenya, Benin, and Kuwait on my list. First, Kenya.
Thank you very much, Mr. Co-Chair. Actually, I want to report on the status of HFC licensing in Kenya, that Kenya is in the process of finalizing the regulations establishing HFC licensing systems in accordance with the legislative process in Kenya. Therefore, Kenya will actually report that before even the 74th meeting of INCOM or during that meeting of the 74th INCOM meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you for this information on the reporting. Then Benin and then Kuwait.
Merci.
Thank you very much, Co-Chair. We would like to thank the government of Thailand and the Ozone Secretariat for organizing this meeting of the Vienna Convention and the Montreal Protocol. Our thanks also go to the President of the IMCOM for this very detailed report. I would just like to offer a comment on the data, on the countries, rather, that have stated that some data were provisional. Document 13.2, Table 3, shows that Benin has declared that its data were provisional for 2019, but now referring to the letter sent 31 July 2024 to the Multilateral Fund. These data were from 2020, 2021, and 2023, and not 2019. And we would appreciate it if this correction could be made, which we believe is important. Thank you.
Thank you. I have two more speakers on my list, Kuwait and the United States, and then I also would like to go to the Secretariat to answer some of the questions. So Kuwait first.
Thank you very much, Mr. Co-Chair, and I would like to thank the Chair of the Implementation Committee and
أشكر رئيس لجنة التنفيذ والمجموعة التي شاركت في وضع هذا التقرير. إن بلدي هو من البلدان المشمولة بالمادة الخامسة، وأعرف مدى الصعوبة في جمع بيانات خط
that I didn't engage previously with, but I want to understand that a specific wording happening today that without any extension on a legal binding for that one, that the reporting have to be finalized as soon as possible. For some countries, this is as soon as possible, as is mentioned from the chair of the IPCOM, years. And for other countries, for 33 months, which is 90 days. How? How this leverage giving for some countries and not given for other countries? We want to understand from the Secretariat on which basis this country was allowed and not being reported that their baseline or revision or provision data still not being finalized. Because this is the first time for me to hear that extent of issues. And now, again, I don't understand the legal barrier for that one, that the chair of implementation committee says that the checkbox was being removed. On which basis? It was put and it removed. Decision from whom? Who have the leverage to do that, and why it's been done? Second thing, I don't have any answer about people submitted it and they have the leverage, but now from today, nobody can have that leverage. How? And how you will deal with the remaining people that after the check, it will be canceled and their data will be finalized, not provisional or not to be reviewed again. But there is a lot of issues. It's not understandable from my point of view, but let's also highlight there is a lot of countries who have this problem, but they report and they stick with their reporting. But within this frame, countries can have the leverage to put a data, and I can put 1111 and I say this is my consumption and this is a revision, my baseline data, and then I will come back after 10 years and say I want to change my baselines. I don't think this is the way that Montreal Protocol works, and I don't think that that can be justified for us until we understand what is the real issue and how this being magnified, as the implementation committee chair says that it's been magnified now, and if it's been allowed for similar countries, it should be allowed for everyone. You cannot bind me for having that leverage that other people have it until we have a decision about the people who do it and the people who want to do it. So there is a lot of discussion about this one. So I think the report of implementation committee is not satisfying for Kuwait as it's been now, and I don't like the justifications happen to solve these issues within a decision of I don't know whom that decision was from. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kuwait. And then I have the United States on my list, and please, if other parties would like to speak, please indicate. But after the United States, I first go to the Secretariat, because there were put some questions to the Secretariat. So United States, please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Co-Chair. Good morning, colleagues, and also to express our sincere thanks to the President of the IMCOM for a very comprehensive and informative report. I did want to speak to the issue of certain parties reporting data as being provisional in nature, because that is a concern to this delegation. And the reason it's a concern is because this practice is not contemplated by the protocol itself or the decisions taken by the parties. And I think with respect to a couple of the points that were just raised by Kuwait, this is sort of the rationale or the underlying reason as to why there's an issue here. We think it's helpful that the Secretariat has removed the checkbox because it's inconsistent with the data forms adopted by decision by the parties. So we have data forms. Those were adopted, to be clear, by the meeting of the parties. And I understood from Grenada's intervention earlier that there may have been some discussions of this in network meetings, but this is an issue for all parties. So certainly there can be discussions at network meetings about this and many other issues, and those can be and are quite helpful. But we have a decision on this that was taken by all the parties. And so we need to actually follow the terms of that decision. So listen, I think it's also has been quite surprising to us to find out that this was sort of an ongoing practice, and that, as the IMCOM chair said, has been utilized by a great many parties apparently have been doing this. Our understanding is that to the extent, as the IMCOM president said, the extent that certain parties continue to persist in reporting data as provisional, the Secretariat will then refer those instances to the IMCOM. And that sounds right to us. But I think the bottom line for us is the parties adopted forms. We adopted a process. We didn't adopt a provisional data process. The forms we adopted did not include a checkbox for provisional adoption. And so what the online portal needs to reflect is the actual content of what was previously agreed and adopted by decision of the parties. And so I think it's actually quite helpful what the IMCOM chair has reported to us to make us aware of the issue. And also, listen, I think all we're actually doing, as we understood it, is returning to the agreed practice. The provisional data submission checkbox was not an agreed practice. So I think the answer to us is we're simply going back to implement what we, as the parties together, agreed was the form and the practice that we were going to use moving forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now I would like to ask the Ozone Secretariat to respond to several questions put forward. Pablo, please.
Co-chair, distinguished delegates, the checkbox for provisional data in the online reporting system was removed based on the discussion of during the last meeting of the implementation committee, when several parties expressed their concern that provisional data is not contemplated in the Montreal Protocol or on decisions by the parties. This checkbox had been included in 2019 as a way to facilitate those parties that had been providing provisional data, but according to the last discussions of the committee, then the Secretariat removed this checkbox. I insist on these discussions.
Thank you. I now would like to give the floor to Armenia.
Dear colleagues, first and foremost, allow us to express our gratitude to the Ozone Secretariat and to the government of Thailand for once again providing us with the opportunity and comfortable conditions for collaborative work. Armenia would also like to extend its thanks to our colleagues from the Implementation Committee for the opportunity given to Armenia to present its position on site and address the concerns of our colleagues. This is extremely important to us, and Armenia greatly appreciates it. We aim to provide clarity to help the delegates understand Armenia's stance and support balanced decision-making regarding our country. Armenia presented its baseline data based on information obtained from formal institutions that include the Customs Service, the Licensing Authority of the Ministry of Environment, and the quote and licensing documents provided by economic operators. The survey of equipment conducted for the purpose of the KIP preparation through the bottom-up approach has shown that the import data are largely underestimated, which was due to non-accounting of movements of refrigerants from the Eurasian Economic Union, no licensing for blends, and online trade through marketplaces that were controlled, where controlled substances are traded freely despite the regulations. Armenia revised the baseline data on the online platform in January 2024, but later received the notification that the country has recalled data, surprisingly for us, as we didn't. And the Ozone Secretariat informed the party that since the country didn't mark the data for the baseline as provisional, to mention that we were unaware of this option, the revised data shall be subject for consideration by the Implementation Committee. Armenia filed a request to revise its baseline data, providing a summary of required information per decision 15/19. The Implementation Committee requested additional documents such as invoices confirming HFC imports and exports. However, Armenia's membership in the Eurasian Economic Union means no customs checks within our common economic zone, making such documents unavailable. We informed the committee on this at the meeting. We are also actively combating unregulated online trade of HFCs and ODSs and have recently seen progress. A ban on postal trade of such substances within the Eurasian Economic Union has already been adopted, and Armenia has advocated for further restrictions on online platforms, that is e-trade. And we again briefed about this at the IMPCOM meeting. Armenia appreciates the understanding shown in the draft decision allowing us to submit additional information next year. However, we note that this could unintentionally place Armenia in a non-compliance regime for 2024. We are confident that this is not the intention of our colleagues who aim to support Armenia. Thank you, and we remain open to cooperation and further discussions.
Thank you, Armenia, and also this will be reflected in the report of this meeting. Then I would like to give the floor to Kuwait.
Thank you very much, Mr. Co-Chair, and sorry to take the floor again, but just to reflect on the answering from the Ozone Secretariat, the checkbox was put from the Ozone Secretariat without the engagement of the parties, just to satisfy parties' needs. but the checkbox removed because an implementation committee asked. Where is the role of the parties in these issues? Where is the alignment with every party to know that there is something happen within this data and this issues? I think also the second question for myself now with this understanding that the implementation committee mentioned that for provisional data to be adjusted, especially for the baseline, there is an informations have to be submitted now. So is that the practice happen to all countries who adjust their baseline on the provisional data, or just specific country was asked to submit more information? And we want to be fair with everyone. And that saying that I nominate, and I suggest, sorry, that we have to have sort of contact group, informal contact group, I don't know, just to look to the implication of what's happening about this provisional data and that how this implication will affect our procedures and role and data, and to make sure such kind of action cannot be happen in the future without the knowledge of the parties and understanding the aim of any change in the format or any change of action within the data, because this data is affecting a lot of issues within the fund, within the project implementation. I don't know, in my mind there is a lot of things. If somebody have submit a request to the MLF to have a project and then he changed the baseline to lower than the fund he retained, I think there is a lot of implication happening to that one, and we want to know what will happen for the countries who still have a provisional data and the checkbox is moved for others. So how we can deal with the people who insist to be dealt as previous country who have that issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kuwait. And I have several speakers on my list now. It's Chile, European Union, Argentina, and Bahrain. But first I would like to give the floor to Chile, to the president of the implementation committee, I presume.
Thank you, Co-Chair. Just to clarify, so the issue of the checkbox, as I said when I read my report, the checkbox was not removed because the IMCOM requested the Secretariat to do exactly that. I think when I read my report, I said, I realized, and I'm reading verbatim what I said, I realized that the Secretariat had removed the checkbox from the online reporting system. So we never requested the Secretariat to do such a thing. To go deeper into our discussion during the last meeting on this particular item on provisional data, what I can say is that members pointed out to the committee that there was a discrepancy in the online reporting tool and the hard copy reporting format. The online reporting format had the checkbox, the other didn't. So I presume that the removal had to do with to make those two report formats consistent. But it wasn't, in any case, by command of the IMCOM or request, at the request of the IMCOM. With regards to the request for the changes in baselines, the only thing I have to repeat here is we just applied decision 1519. All the members, when taking the floor, were referring to the decision 1519 and what its in that decision in order to take a sound outcome on these particular cases. Just wanted to clarify that. We are not moving further apart from any procedure, but it has always been my aim to adhere strictly to the technical and legal matters. Thank you.
Thank you for this explanation. Then I give the floor to the European Union.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. We thought the reporting by the chair of the implementation committee in a way concerning, because it seems that by the fact that one could indicate that it deems its data as provisional, that there is unclarity at what point in time the implementation committee can review the data. That is, I think, problematic, and I think providing clarity when, you know, what the next step is in the procedure is important. We note that if one would not be able to indicate data as provisional, we wouldn't have this problem. So in that way, I would concur with the intervention of the US delegate that this clarifies what we had agreed as parties. We also note that if data would be not correct or needs updating, there are procedures for correcting data. So just to say there are other ways to facilitate certain concerns for parties. But that doesn't stand in the way that we are, of course, willing to discuss how, let's say, this issue can be resolved in a way that it helps all parties to find good manners to report their data. But we would agree that having clarity on this is really important. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I have Argentina and Bahrain on my list, and then I would like to give the floor to the Secretariat. Argentina.
Gracias, señor copresidente.
Thank you, Co-Chair. We would like to support the motion put forward by a colleague from Kuwait to set up a contact group to discuss this issue. We do see with concern this issue, as highlighted by the United States, the fact that data have been dealt with in such a way, but we are also concerned about the legal certainty through the arrival decisions on including or deleting a checkbox in the data reporting forms, or the difference between online and paper reporting. And in this regard, we'd like, first of all, to concur with the legal officer of the Secretariat, or would like to seek greater clarity from the legal officer or from the implementation committee. Therefore, we would like to set up a contact group to clear up these matters, but in any case, we would ask that any changes made by the Zone Secretariat or by the Implementation Committee can be discussed, and we do therefore need to be able to tackle this together. We do understand that this was not done. Therefore, we would ask you, please, to respect the correct procedure when coming to decisions. Lastly, we believe that when you come to this type of decision, please remember that we're talking about the capacities of countries to comply. And of course, the relationship with financing under the executive committee of the multilateral fund. We do not want to see these funding means to be affected by decisions that are made in this meeting. Also, as established under the protocol, the goal of the implementation committee is to come to friendly decisions in respect of those countries that are affected by decisions. Therefore, we would like to have a contact group set up so that we can discuss this issue in specific terms. Thank you.
I have Bahrain on my list.
شكرا سيد.
Thank you, Co-President. I would also like to thank the Implementation Committee for the comprehensive report that was presented to us today. It's quite interesting that under this agenda item, we heard of, let's say, rather odd practices that we hear about for the first time in our meetings, practices that we were not even aware that were ever possible or not possible. Specifically, when it comes to the issue of provisional data, this is quite concerning. I will not go over what the other colleagues have already said, that this is quite concerning. And it wasn't even clear if this would be a way for any party, presently or in the future, to present data that could be put for amendment, that could be withdrawn, could be revoked, and until when this would remain possible and through which mechanism, knowing that this has already happened in the past. As for removing the checkbox, through the response presented by the IMCOM as well as the comments made by the president of the IMCOM, it wasn't very clear when the checkbox was removed and how was that specifically done. We would like to seek further clarification on the matter to see who actually made that decision and how the decision was made and when was it actually enacted. So please give us a clear-cut answer to these questions so that the relevant parties are able to understand specifically how the process took place. Of course, I totally understand the concerns of the different parties that have expressed how the baseline data has become rather controversial, and I do think that it's important to engage in a clear discussion, in a comprehensive discussion on all these matters, and this is why I would like to second what the colleague of the delegate of Kuwait has proposed, and as it was also supported by the colleague from Argentina, to establish a contact group under any kind of format, be it formal or not, to discuss these matters. Thank you, Co-President.
Thank you. I first would like to give the floor to the Ozone Secretariat to respond. And then I have a list of speakers, so please indicate if you would like to speak, but first I would like the Ozone Secretariat to respond.
Good morning. We will try our best to address all the questions, and where we are not clear, then probably some of the discussions can take place bilaterally. The main thing we would like to say is that when we included the checkbox in the data reporting forms, it was just based on an existing practice where parties, in submitting the information, would sometimes indicate that the data was provisional. And since it had been going on for a long time, and normally we needed to go back to those parties to confirm when the data was final, so we needed a mechanism to be able to track easily. And so that's why the checkbox was included. It was a good faith action, not intended to cause trouble. But now, on the basis of discussions at the IMCOM, and we point out that the IMCOM is a subsidiary body of the meeting of the parties, or at least it's established by the protocol. As a secretariat, we listen to what you say, and once we found that in so doing, in so adding a checkbox, we might have encouraged too much usage of that provision, and based on concerns expressed by the parties, and as mentioned by several parties, it's not even in the approved data forms by the parties. That's why after the IMCOM meeting and after hearing all the concerns, we removed the provisional checkbox from the online reporting system so that we wait until we have a clearer understanding of the situation. And so, even as the discussions are going on here, as a secretariat, we are listening. I think with that statement, probably I've answered the question of when it was removed. It was after the IMCOM meeting. Why it was removed? Because of the concerns expressed. There was a question of what will happen to those parties that have submitted provisional data, and I mean data that's already submitted as provisional. Basically, the Secretariat will present that information to the committee at the next meeting, and we will hopefully get appropriate guidance. So I think those are the questions I can think of, so unless I've left out something. Thank you very much.
Thank you for these clarifications. I have several speakers on my list. Tanzania, US, Canada, Armenia, Russian Federation, Saudi Arabia. Please indicate if you would like to speak. And first, Tanzania.
Thank you. This being the first time the United Republic of Tanzania is contributing, my delegation would like to thank the government and the people of the Kingdom of Thailand for their hospitality and for the Ozone Secretariat for organizing this important meeting. We would like to inform the meeting that Tanzania has a licensing framework for ODS in place through the Ozone regulations of 2022, whereby a person wishing or desiring to import or export controlled substances is required to seek for a permit from the Registrar of Chemicals or Director General of Tanzania Bureau of Standards. Thank you, Co-Chair.
Thank you, Tanzania. US?
Thank you, Co-Chair, and sorry for taking the floor a second time, but we just wanted to react to a few of the comments that I think have been quite helpful and informative. I think it could be used, so this is a bit of a complicated issue on the provisional reporting, so perhaps it is useful to have a small group to discuss it. Just picking up on the point I think Bahrain made at the end, perhaps an informal group is what would be most appropriate. We don't have a CRP that we're taking up and working on. I think it's more of a discussion that is needed in the first place. So that would be perhaps our suggestion, because I do think the first thing we need is an exchange, and I think that can probably better happen in a smaller group. I think there are some important issues that have just been raised. The way I would sort of think of it is, so this has been happening to some extent in the past. We're not sure with respect to where it has already happened that there's any significant effect, in the sense of we think parties eventually have gone back and provided their final data, and presumably we think, and in the informal group perhaps we can discuss this, we would assume that sort of everything ultimately gets cleaned up. So maybe we can talk about that in the small group. I think the immediate issue for us is that if you leave so we have agreed forms and they don't, there's nothing about submitting provisional data in the forms that we have agreed. And as the EU noted, there's also an agreed process to change, to make changes. And so this provisional bit is sort of working outside of our agreed forms and our agreed process. And I think we're a little less worried about the past and mostly focused on, like, I think what we don't want to do, and this is why we think it's helpful. So I think the Secretariat has correctly identified, thanks to the IMPCOM like flagging this issue, that actually there's no protocol or decisional basis for actual provisional submission. So I think they've just corrected that to make it match the actual agreed forms. But the importance of that is so that people don't keep, like, I think that's the issue. We can't change the past, but we should stop encouraging countries to continue submitting the provisional data. So that would be the biggest issue for us, and that's why we think it's useful that the checkbox has been removed. And just to say, yeah, I think it would be useful to have a small informal group, because I think there are some complexities here we're beginning to hear in this discussion. So appreciate a little bit of time at this meeting to dig a little more into that. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Canada, Armenia, Russian Federation, Saudi Arabia, and Switzerland on my list, and I would like to close the list now. So I don't see any other parties coming to the list, so Canada, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Convener. First of all, I'd like to thank the President of the Implementation Committee for very interesting and clearly expressed report. Now, specifically, I wanted to address the issue of having a group to discuss the matter of provisional data. But having heard the intervention from the United States, I have to say we're very much on the same mind of this. We had seen two options. One was that we understand the Implementation Committee will have to continue to consider this issue, and perhaps we could have just entrusted them to continue to consider the matter, including the questions that were raised during this meeting. And then, you know, at a future meeting, we may have more information on the scope of this issue, whether it will indeed lead to some kind of issues or problems. We don't know that yet. So that would be sort of one way to move forward and to the extent that parties are interested in opining on this issue, they could certainly try to do so through their regional representative on the Implementation Committee. Having said this, we also don't oppose to have an informal group discussion on this meeting, but I would emphasize with respect to the issues, the way they have been framed, I think, by the delegates from Kuwait and the United States. So, you know, it's not a discussion on whether, you know, we should reinsert a checkbox to allow countries to submit provisional data. We think the US was very clear about that, you know, the protocol text or the decision of the Montreal Protocol just don't allow the submission of provisional data. So unfortunate that had been done for a temporary basis, but, you know, that doesn't mean we want to perpetuate the situation. However, we heard Kuwait raise issues about how to deal with the fact that a number of parties have already checked this provisional checkbox, provisional data checkbox, and that other parties won't have that opportunities. There's issues of potential fairness there. I'm not sure what we can do about it, but, you know, open to discuss. Also, what happens if the countries that submitted did check the provisional data checkbox, what happens with them? Should they submit at some point other data and how to ensure that this practice or this kind of thing doesn't happen again. I think that's what we heard the delegate from Kuwait say. So I think, that would be an interesting group of issues as a mandate for the informal group. But just to say again that, we would be interested in participating in the discussion on the understanding that, we don't reopen the idea that the submission of provisional data can be an acceptable practice from now on, given that it's fully inconsistent with the Montreal Protocol and the decisions that we have. Thank you, Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Canada. And then I would like to give the floor to Armenia.
Well, having heard the explanations provided by the Ozone Secretariat about their intentions of providing this opportunity and inserting this tick box for provisional data on the online platform, I would like to bring to the attention of all the parties that not all the parties were aware of this opportunity. And this has been kind of discriminatory because those parties that were aware of this opportunity ticked the box, and I am aware of a party which managed to change due to this its baseline data in June 2024 without having to go to the implementation committee and submitting all the justification documents. Whereas Armenia, which has been placed in a non-advantageous position as compared to that, and had to go through this process. We changed the data in January 2024, but then we were informed by the Secretariat that we have to go through the implementation committee. So Armenia is also very much interested in participating in the contact group, whether it will be informal or formal, although I believe that there are some basis for having a formal group because we do have the CRP of the draft decisions forwarded by the implementation committee. But I leave this to the parties to decide. Thank you.
Thank you, Armenia. Then the Russian Federation.
Спасибо, господин сопредседатель. Мы очень внимательно слушали дискуссию, и для нас очевидно, что есть стороны...
We have listened very closely to this discussion. Thank you, Chair. And it is clear to us that the use of provisional data has been the only existing option for certain countries. If these parties have issues with their data, and we know that they obtain data from customs records, and if we're talking about considerable volumes, if we're talking about a major country, customs can deliver us data slowly, drop by drop, or all at once. And therefore, this online tool is extremely useful. We are grateful to the Secretariat for having developed it, and it is also very user-friendly. And then, of course, at the same time, it is quite clear that there are data that cannot be provided, and therefore a provisional or non-official route needs to be taken. It is quite simply having a tool, but being more practical in the way that this tool is used. I think, therefore, this might well be very instructive for the implementation committee. It is about the fact that final data cannot always be provided. Provisional data means that certain countries have difficulties in providing final data. And therefore, if these data are provisional, what are we going to do with the data? Are we going to overlook this data? Quite simply, they have not yet tapped submit. They have filled out the form, but in official terms, they have not provided us with the final data. Or at the same time, we may consider that there are provisional data, but existing data, but they're not yet final. What does this mean? This means that there is going to be a problem for us to overcome. Therefore, we need a show of good faith from countries. We need to help parties. And therefore, if we have an option available to countries for them to show that they have provisional data, then these countries are going to need help. I believe that we should not deprive countries of a tool that is very useful to them. And this is also a tool that will help us to identify problems. Therefore, I do believe that we need to have an option open to us, but we need to find a different way of working with data. Thank you.
Thank you. Then I go to Saudi Arabia, and the last speaker on my list is Switzerland, and then we will come up with a way forward. Saudi Arabia.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. I would like to thank the Implementation Committee for the report presented. And as several of my concerns were presented already by other parties, so I will be brief in my intervention. We do support the establishment of discussion to further examine this situation, allowing us to deep in our understanding and discuss ways to support parties facing several challenges. And I think this will help us to address specific difficulties and explore solutions and options to ensure all parties in compliance. Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair.
Thank you. Switzerland.
Thank you very much, Mr. Co-Chair. We would like first to thank the President of the Implementation Committee for this very informative report that was very helpful for us to grasp the discussion that happened. Regarding provisional data, we would like to echo some of the concern expressed by our colleagues. We do have several questions regarding how this practice interlink with compliance requirements and when does the Implementation Committee role intervenes. We do appreciate the suggestion that has been made by several colleagues to look towards the future and how to deal with this issue from now on in order to be consistent with the Montreal Protocol. And in this sense, we would be very interested in a space for preliminary exchanges, and we believe an informal setting might be the right setting for starting such a discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And now I need a minute to have a short discussion here.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to say that CRP1, the proposal is to put that forward to the higher level segment. And some parties had comments on it, and they will be reflected in the report. But we would like to propose that this CRP is put forward to the high level segment. So that's one. And I just want to see if there are any objections to that, and we can agree upon that. Yes, so that will be done. Secondly, based on the discussion we had on provisional data, to have an informal group, because there were a lot of different views and also questions, and I definitely think that the Secretariat has to be there to answer those questions as well. And that informal group could look at the issue of provisional data reporting that has happened in the past and became a practice, and look at it in the light of the decisions taken by the parties on data reporting. And then explore the issue and see what is a way forward. It's an informal group because there's no CRP or a draft decision for this, but just look at this issue and get clarifications. And then come back to plenary on this later on. So it's an informal group, and is that agreeable to everybody? I think so, so I don't see any requests for the floor. So that informal group can start, and we will look for a venue and a time where the group can meet. Thank you. Then I would like to go to the next agenda item. Miruza.
Thank you, and thank you everyone. We will now consider agenda item 5 on Vienna Convention issues. And first, we will consider agenda item 5A on the report of the 12th meeting of the ozone research managers of the parties to the Vienna Convention. Delegates will recall that in accordance with decisions of the Conference of the Parties to the Vienna Convention, the ozone research managers meet once every 3 years, about 6 months before the meeting of the COP, to discuss issues related to ozone research and systematic observations and make recommendations to the COP. The recommendations of the 12th meeting of the ORM, held this year in April in Geneva, are included in the ORM 12 report and are reproduced in document 13.6. Both documents are available on the meeting portal. I'm pleased to note that Ms. Maria Cazola from Ecuador and Mr. Wolfgang Steinbrecht from Germany, co-chairs of ORM, are with us to present the outcomes of ORM 12. Co-chairs, if you're ready, you have the floor, and we would appreciate if you could keep the presentation to 15 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. Thank you, distinguished delegates, for your attention. For us, co-chairs of the Ozone Research Managers, it is a pleasure to report to the parties the outcome of the 12th ORM that was held in Geneva in April this year. First of all, we would like to mention that this is a very compressed summary of the recommendations of the 12th ORM, and the full recommendations in very detailed manner can be found at the website of the Ozone Secretariat. As a brief background, the ORM reports and WMO UNEP scientific assessments are required under the Vienna Convention and the Montreal Protocol, but they have different purposes. The scientific assessments inform the parties about the latest science and the most recent research for informed decisions. As per the ORM reports, they address research and monitoring needs in light of information provided by the assessments. ORM reports make recommendations regarding international actions on research, monitoring, international coordination, and networking. In regard to the agenda adopted at the 12th ORM, we discussed Vienna Convention matters, the Trust Fund for Research and Systematic Observations. The SAP reported on the state of the ozone layer and expected recovery, as well as ozone layer climate change emerging issues, for example, climate intervention. We discussed ground-based ozone and UV monitoring, controlled substances monitoring, space-based monitoring. Also, the parties presented their national and regional reports on ozone research and monitoring. With these elements, we framed the recommendations for the ORM report, which were finally adopted. In regard to the recommendations, they covered 5 areas: research needs, systematic observations, gaps in atmospheric monitoring of controlled substances, and options to enhance such monitoring. This item is particularly relevant, and that is why it is highlighted in this presentation. So in upcoming slides, you will see some items that are equally highlighted in red and are connected to this area of the recommendations. Also on data archiving and stewardship and capacity building. In regard to the research needs, the 12th ORM recommend continue observing and modeling stratospheric ozone variations and trends to improve understanding of lower stratospheric ozone in connection to climate change, to improve understanding of emissions of ozone depleting substances, HFCs, HFOs, feedstocks, very short-lived halogenated substances, and other relevant gases, their sources, their importance, top-down versus bottom-up estimates. And in order to do this, it is necessary, this is built upon expanded monitoring, observations, modeling, and research of these gases. The 12th ORM also recommend to improve the understanding of ozone-climate coupling and the impact on global circulation changes. Equally important to improve the understanding of effects from extreme events due to climate, such as wildfires, other events such as volcanic eruptions, supersonic aviation, space activities, and climate intervention. And the reason is because all these events affect aerosols in the stratosphere, which has an impact on the ozone layer. This is a very compressed summary, but the research needs in the full report are very detailed, and we invite all the parties to take a look at the full report. In regard to systematic observations, the 12th ORM recommends monitoring of trace gases, stratospheric aerosols, surface UV has to continue as opposed to shrinking. It is a concern of the ORM that the number of observing stations is decreasing, and therefore support is needed to continue with this very critical activity. The ORM also recommends maintaining proven systems to observe total column ozone, such as, for example, the observations from Brewer and Dobson instruments, but also to implement and accelerate the implementation of other networks and instrumentation that are cost-effective and low cost. A very important recommendation is to close the observational gaps, especially in areas where observations are very scarce. And usually this is in Article 5 countries. More observations are needed in those places. And to improve monitoring of vertical profiles, fluxes of ODS, very short-lived halogenated substances, and other gases such as N2O, methane, and water vapor. Satellite observations are also important, and a concern is that the observations, profiling observations, for example, the MLS is going to end soon, so ground-based observations could substitute for that. And to improve monitoring of variables relevant to study connections between ozone and climate change. And throughout, it is emphasized that observations such as ground-based and ozone sounding are at the heart of validating satellite data for trends and analysis. And with this, I hand over to my co-chair. Thank you.
Thank you. The next larger point we discussed was the gaps in monitoring of controlled substances. This has, as you can see from the first 2 points, has a longer history and has also been requested by the parties to be looked into. At the ORM, we recognized the success of a pilot project in Bangladesh that was funded by the EU. It is important after this to find out which stations would make sense. There was a white paper on the possible range of costs, and they vary very much on depending where you go, what's already there. It's quite clear that it's necessary to leverage existing monitoring stations and programs, so the ORMs recognize that. A big recommendation that you've already heard about or has been discussed is the parties to enhance the Vienna Convention trust fund for research and systematic observations to possibly sustain these new needed stations. And it's very important for the ORM that this is advanced, and it's also related to the agenda item 4F that has been discussed. I'm going to be going a little bit faster in the interest of time on the next ones. This is about data archiving and stewardship. Obviously, it's very important to recognize the importance of the data centers, to encourage all data providers to submit their data there. Data that's not out and accessible and following FAIR and other principles is not as useful. So this is a very important point. And some of the data centers, it's also necessary to recognize that if you want to do something, you need the people and the money. And of course, we all know that. important point in the ORMs is always a discussion of capacity building. The ORM recognizes that there has been quite a bit of success in the past, especially regarding ground-based total ozone measurements, calibrating and intercomparing those. The Vienna Convention Trust Fund on Observations and Research has helped in the past for many, many years with doing that, although the money is very, very tight. So getting more money is important. One of the things that the trust fund, the capacity building is very important, is building the scientific capacity in developing countries and other countries, and a future expansion of the fund would certainly help to get better there, and the possibilities and the needs that come up with monitoring controlled substances is certainly important in that aspect. Let me try to summarize even more. The key points of the ORM are that we need to keep improving our understanding and accuracy of future projections of global ozone and the measurements to see if ozone is doing what we think it should be doing, which includes looking at the climate change and how that affects things. We need to fill the gaps in the atmospheric monitoring of controlled substances. One way to help do that would be to enhance the Vienna Convention Trust Fund for activities on research and systematic observations so that we can better get towards these goals, and capacity building is certainly a part of that. And I'll end the talk by borrowing a slide that you've already seen yesterday. This is slide 4 of the SAP presentation. The one problem that we certainly have is that the red line, the reporting-based emissions, does not match up at all with the blue line, the atmospheric observations-derived emissions, and we've heard about the problems with the reporting this morning. So the key is here that we need to fill the gap, that we need the observations that tell us where emissions might be coming from. And if you allow me to use an example from traffic, the Montreal Protocol put up the speed signs. We also need a few radars to make sure that people are following the speed limits. Just putting up the speed signs is not going to do it. So this leaves me with my last slide, which is to thank all the participants of the ORM, very specifically the Ozone Secretariat and also the WMO that hosted us there. And I'd also like to thank the Secretariat here for doing, again, an amazing job in organizing it, and Thailand for the, as the Canadian representative, for the indeed very warm welcome here in this country. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the presentation, and on behalf of all the parties, I would like to thank you, the co-chairs of ORM 12, and also the ozone research managers and the experts who participated in ORM 12 for the excellent work and for the recommendation.
Thank you.
Thank you. A CRP has been submitted for consideration under this agenda item, and I would like to invite one of the proponents, Finland, to introduce the CRP.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair, and thanks for the presentations by the ORM chairs. As co-chair of this meeting have informed us, we need to have decisions related to the atmospheric monitoring, enhancing of it, both at the COP and the MOP, in order to facilitate progress in enhancing of global and regional atmospheric monitoring, which is a key asset to support the integrity and credibility of the most successful environmental agreement, the Vienna Convention and the Montreal Protocol. To facilitate that, the members of the COP Bureau who were present at the ORM 12 meeting have submitted 2 CRPs for the consideration of the parties. One is on recommendations of the ORM, on which we just had a presentation and which are posted in the portal. and general trust fund for financing activities on research and systematic observations relevant to the Vienna Convention. They have been posted into the conference portal, and translations are being made. If they are not yet posted, they will be soon posted there. So what we suggest is that also, and which is also advised by the Madam Co-Chair of this conference, that these CRPs will be discussed in the contact group of the regional, in the same contact group of the regional atmospheric monitoring, in which constructive discussions have been taking place already at the OEDWG and this morning. And so I very briefly present these CRPs. So the recommendations of the ozone research managers is quite traditional one. It follows the same lines as the earlier decisions of COPs, but it is complemented with the elements related to enhancing the monitoring of the controlled substances. And these items are marked in the draft as highlighted as green for ease of reading. And I only take some examples of the operational paragraphs, what is the main content. So on this CRP, we suggest that the parties take note on appreciation of the report of the 12th ORM and to encourage parties to adopt and implement as appropriate the recommendations of the ozone research managers under the topics of research needs, systematic observations, gaps in global coverage of atmospheric monitoring of controlled substances, and options for enhancing such monitoring, data archiving, stewardship, and capacity building. And to encourage parties accord priority to some items of the different groups of the ORM related to research and systematic observation activities, maintaining and augmenting and restoring, where feasible, establishing new long-term capacity for atmospheric monitoring and observation of substances controlled under the Montreal Protocol, improved management and analysis of observation data, including international open access and collaborative research activities, support for capacity building in developing countries on these activities, encouraging national ozone focal points to improve communication with the ozone research managers, and requesting ozone research managers at the next, on the 13th meeting, to continue review the situation of atmospheric measurements and monitoring of substances controlled by the Montreal Protocol and make specific recommendations for further strengthening of atmospheric monitoring. So that was the first CRP submitted by Ecuador, Finland, and Indonesia. So members of the Bureau who were present in the ORM 12 meeting. And the second CRP is about General Trust Fund for financing activities on research and systematic observations relevant to the Vienna Convention. And I go directly to operational paragraphs.
Can I come in? We will just consider the first CRP as you just have presented. And when we get to the agenda item 5B, you can present the CRP too. So the one that we, thank you so much. So the CRP just presented by Finland, the is COP CRP1, and it's posted on the meeting portal. Thank you so much. And like rightly indicated, and also as we indicated yesterday, the CRP will be discussed in the contact group of the atmospheric monitoring that we established yesterday. And as also have indicated the green and yellow text, it would be good if the contact group could focus on the highlight text when discussing this CRP. And unless there are burning questions, I would like to turn to next agenda item, which would be 5B. Australia, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Co-Chair, and good afternoon to delegations. We don't have any burning questions. We just wanted to make a very few quick observations. We would like to welcome the report from the 12th Ozone Research Managers meeting, and we are supportive of the report's recommendations. They do largely point to the need to expand and improve the global monitoring networks and to ensure their long-term sustainability. And as has been noted, these recommendations do tie in closely with agenda item 4F on atmospheric monitoring of controlled substances. The recommendations also relate to emerging issues that may present new vulnerabilities to the protection of the ozone layer and the goals of the protocol. We would like to thank Ecuador, Finland and Indonesia for bringing forward a draft CRP for our consideration. We will be happy to work with other parties on the CRP in the contact group. We have also received some thoughts from our own scientists involved at the meeting about priorities, and we will review and compare what is in the CRP and potentially see if there are any additions that we could make. Thank you very much, Co-Chair.
Thank you, Australia. And no, okay. Thank you. And with this, I will hand over to my co-chair for the next agenda item.
Thank you, Miruza. And we are at agenda item 5B, status of the General Trust Fund on research and systematic observations. Indeed, there will be some people coming to the stage. Please come forward if Professor Ravi Shankara and Paola Lai and Sophia to give the presentations. Parties may recall that decision 6.2 called for the Secretariat to establish an extra budgetary fund for receiving voluntary contributions from the parties to the Vienna Convention and international organizations for the purpose of financing research and observation activities related to the Vienna Convention. At the 10th meeting in 2014, the COP established an advisory committee for the Trust Fund in an effort to improve the performance of the Trust Fund by ensuring that projects to be funded under it are of high quality. The committee was also requested to develop a short-term plan and a long-term strategy to enhance the effectiveness of the fund. The status of the Trust Fund and its activities, as well as the report of the Advisory Committee on its implementation for the long-term strategy and short-term plan of the Trust Fund, is set out in document Conv 13/7, available on the meeting portal. First of all, I would like to give the floor to Professor Ravi Shankara, member of the Advisory Committee, to report on the committee's work. Professor Ravi, please, you have the floor for 10 minutes, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon, folks. We really appreciate the opportunity to tell you about what has happened in the Advisory Committee for the General Trust Fund for systematic observations relevant to the Vienna Convention. I'm sure you all figured out that I'm not Sophie Godin. She's the chair of the committee, and unfortunately she couldn't make it. Therefore, I am kind of taking her place. I hope I won't do too bad a job and make sure that I present our findings. Just to set the stage, the goals of the advisory committee of the trust fund, I just want to kind of point out that it was established in 2014, and its mandate was to develop a long-term strategy and also a short-term action plan, and thirdly, to evaluate and help development of proposals, taking into consideration the regional balance and liaison with various proposals to make it better. And the thing that you know is that the ozone layer issue is not uncoupled from other issues. So, for example, there are issues related to climate and stratospheric ozone. Then, of course, there is the issue of observations for both climate and ozone layer variables. And in addition, the idea of the Vienna Convention Trust Fund was to enhance the resources and enable capacity building to more fully participate in the development of ideas and the science for addressing the issues of the Montreal Protocol. So I just want to again emphasize this aspect of the capacity building for developing countries, or I should say Article 5 countries, and countries with economies in transition. So currently the focus is on measuring ozone vertical profiles in the stratosphere and the upper troposphere, as well as surface UV radiation. After all, the Montreal Protocol was put in place to ensure that the ozone layer is intact and it does not increase the surface UV radiation. The current composition of the committee is listed here. Those listed with an asterisk are actually at this meeting. I would encourage the parties to talk to them if you have specific questions you would like to ask them or discuss certain things. So I just want to, on behalf of the co-chair, the chair, thank all the people for the work they do. This is actually an in-kind contribution to the Vienna Convention Trust Fund from all these people and their institutions and their countries. The advisory committee since COP12 has done a bunch of things. I just want to tell you from our perspective the bottom line. For the amount of resources that has been expended for this trust fund, the yield is excellent for the amount of money that has been spent. Sophia is going to talk about specifically how much money has been spent and received, etc. The task of the committee is to evaluate the proposals. We did that for the first, the call that came in 2020, and also for the call that was issued in 2023. The guidelines for these proposals are pretty clear, and it has been written out. It is the key point is this money should be viewed as seed money to actually start and nourish and continue programs in these countries. And it is limited to $50,000 US because of the limitations in the amount of money that's available. And it is very important to emphasize that the countries need to cost share in this effort. So because of the limited funding, we have been focusing mostly on the short-term plans, and essentially it's focused on calibration of intercomparison campaigns, training activities, instrument refurbishment, acquisition of instrument by Article 5 and countries with economies in transition to enhance capacity. I'm going to emphasize this again. The intercomparisons and calibrations are absolutely essential for us to know the trend of stratospheric ozone. After all, we are in what I would call the phase of the Montreal Protocol to make sure that the goals of the Montreal Protocol are met, what I would call the accountability phase of the Montreal Protocol. More resources would allow, of course, more proposals to be funded and more activities to be carried out, including monitoring controlled substances. So I'll very briefly note a few of the progress made in the last few years. The long-term strategy and short-term plans was developed and presented to the parties, and specifically identified the gaps and needs in research and monitoring of ozone and related climate variables, facilitating the relocation of unused Dobson and Brewer instruments. Dobson and Brewer instruments are the corner pieces on which our satellite measurements give us the trends. We can't do without them. And also it's necessary to foster a stronger relationship with the scientific institutions and related global networks. There are quite a few of them. And it also enables exploring the opportunities to leverage and characterize the resources of the trust fund. So the key message here is the trust fund provides a lot more than the amount of money it spends, because it constantly tries to leverage the fund to do more with what is available. In terms of identifying the gaps, those things are listed. I'll briefly go through this. Need to strengthen the total observations, ozone observations in the tropics and subtropics, and also the parts of the southern hemisphere. Need for high quality measurements, calibration of and validation of satellite sensors, and note that the Brewer and Dobson spectrometers still are the cornerstones for total ozone observations, and they are dwindling, and also the expertise for dealing with them is going down. So it is essential for us to transition from these legacy instruments into something that is more modern and hopefully longer lasting and easier to operate instruments. So it's essential to go through this transition of the legacy instruments. The identification of gaps and needs, I'll just very briefly mention there are still issues related to the ozone vertical profiles and the distribution of ozone, and the scientific activities supporting the Montreal Protocol. We encourage greater participation from Article 5 countries and also countries with economies in transition, not only in doing the science, but evaluating the science and taking the science to the users, that is you, the parties. So I highly encourage people to participate in these activities. In a different light, the things we have talked about, then we need to quantify the emissions of controlled substances. And we came up with the idea that there's some confusion as to exactly what VCTF funds, what needs to be done, etc. We would like to organize a virtual workshop that will enable the countries to know how to write the proposal, what to write, what are the things that are being looked at. That way, would actually enhance these capabilities for writing superb proposals. Okay. And a couple of very quick things. Relocation of idle ozone monitoring instruments. There are instruments that could be repurposed, rebuilt, refurbished, and could be used in countries that really need them. So this is kind of the joint effort of the parties would make this feasible and successful. It requires not only the countries who would like to have it, but also the countries who can supply those instruments and repair them if necessary. Getting towards the end, the foster stronger relationship with scientific institutions and related global networks. There are many of them, and in kind of coming together with these networks would enable the countries to actually look at what they can do and how best they can provide that information. And we could enhance the relationship between the Pandonia global network, which uses the Pandora spectrometers and the other instruments, and especially satellite missions, and enhancing the relationship between GCAS, which is mostly geared towards looking at climate variables and kind of bringing together the synergies in these observations so that we can get more for our money, and maintaining close connections between advisory committees and existing controlled substance networks, such as, for example, the NOAA network and the A-Gauge network. If this trust fund takes on the monitoring of Montreal Protocol gases. One more couple of quick things. Leveraging resources to safeguard research and observation in line with the strategic plan is very important. Because of limited resources, we need to maintain the focus on ozone and UV in the short term. Contribution to the monitoring of controlled substances upon additional funding from the parties would be in line with the long-term strategy, and the committee stands ready to take this on and augment whatever expertise we need to have to make this a successful endeavor. And we look forward to an opportunity to do that if your CRPs all work out. With that, I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Ravi Shankara, for this very good presentation. And now I would like to give the floor to Sophia. You have 5 minutes to give your presentation, please.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. I would like to give you a brief summary of the status of the General Trust Fund for financing activities on research and systematic observations relevant to the Vienna Convention, and which I will refer to as Trust Fund from now on. As it was mentioned earlier, this trust fund was established by decision 6/2 by COP 6 in 2002 in order, and the idea was this fund was to be extra budgetary and receive voluntary contributions from parties and international organizations in order to finance activities on research and systematic observations in developing countries and countries with economies in transition. What is important to mention here is that the aim of the Trust Fund is actually to provide complementary support for continued maintenance and calibration of ground-based stations that monitor column ozone, ozone profiles, and UV radiation in these countries. However, the decision also provided that other activities identified by the ORM, the Ozone Research Managers, in consultation with co-chairs, the co-chairs of the SAP and DAP, could also be considered for funding. A few words about the operation of the trust fund. After this decision was adopted in 2002, then the trust fund was established actually in February 2003. Then in September 2005, a memorandum of understanding was signed between UNEP and WMO, which was approved by COP7 in December of the same year. So since then, project activities have been implemented through WMO, and since 2015, these activities have been overseen by the Advisory Committee of the Trust Fund, which was established in 2014 through COP Decision 10/3. The Secretariat sends reports on the status of the fund and its activities on an annual basis to all parties, including an invitation for them to contribute. Now, what is the status of the funds? Since its inception in 2003 and up to the end of September 2024, the total funds received for trust fund activities were about $943,000, and out of these, about $635,000 have been dispersed and allocated to approved activities, which means that we are left now with about $308,000 to use available for future activities. And funds have been received by 16 parties, which are listed on this slide. But it is very important also to note that in-kind contributions have also been received throughout the years for implementation of activities from some of these parties which are listed here, but also from other parties which are not. If we want to see the geographical distribution of activities approved since 2003, then you can look at this map. The green dots indicate completed activities, the yellow ones ongoing activities, and the red ones planned activities. On the right, you can see a small table which shows basically the types of project activities which have been approved and the number of projects per type. Altogether, there are 22, and all of them were basically related to ozone and UV monitoring, whether these were calibrations, intercomparisons, relocations of instruments, workshops, and so on. If you want to see more information, then you can go on our website. We have through this link, which is, and then you can see also summaries of the individual activities through this link indicated on this slide. So periodically, the Secretariat sends requests, calls the developing countries and countries with economies in transition to submit proposals for seed funding. Under the Trust Fund. And the last time we did it was on the 23rd of November, 2023, noting that these activities should fulfill, this proposal should fulfill some specific criteria and should not exceed $50,000 each. In response, we received 15 proposals from 12 parties, which you can see here, and which could be grouped in these three broad categories. We had some on ozone monitoring, some on UV monitoring, but we had some other ones which were included at least elements of ODS monitoring or only workshops, training, public awareness, and so on. The total funds requested for all these proposals, as you can see here, there were about $4.6 million, and then I put also the total funds available, which are about 308,000 for comparison. So basically, the Advisory Committee evaluated all the new proposals received this month, and then the Secretariat has provided to the proposers feedback on the results of these evaluations by the Advisory Committee, including requests for follow-up actions. So I think with this, I conclude my presentation on the status of the Trust Fund. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophia. Then I would like to give the floor to Paolo Lai from the WMO. So please, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. I'd like to, on behalf of WMO, to thank first the government of Thailand for hosting this meeting and my colleagues from the Ozone Secretariat for the organization. So the WMO, the UN Specialized Agency for Weather, Climate and Hydrology, is actually involved for the implementation of the decision of the Advisory Committee and the Ozone Secretariat. And I will just summarize what is the role of WMO in this context. What we do supporting the decision of the Trust Fund Advisory Committee is to support calibration and comparison of ozone measuring instruments. We are supporting actions for enhancing capacity in the different countries. We are supporting actions for the network design. And we are anticipating regional needs for intercalibration, intercomparison exercise before submission to the trust fund. Over the last 3 years, you have seen all the different activities in the map that Sophia just presented, but over the last 3 years, we have supported the implementation of a number of projects. Some are completed in Kyrgyzstan and in Comoros. Some are on hold due to different reasons in Burkina Faso and in Belarus. And some are ongoing or planned. The South American Brewer Spectrometer Network in Santa Maria, and the work in Mexico for monitoring solar ultraviolet radiation for Central America and the Caribbean. The planned activities for WMO is, as mentioned, to anticipate future intercalibration proposals to the Trust Fund. You have to know that an intercalibration exercise is complex to organize. It has some costs. The trust fund cannot usually cover the full cost of an intercalibration exercise. So we are doing that. We are preparing for this intercalibration exercise in region 1 and 2 of WMO. What we do is to follow up on data delivery after the calibration has taken place or after the implementation of the projects. The results from past activities that we see is that high quality information is available. That's an important place, an important issue to be mentioned. Is available from many sites in the world after the projects have been achieved. This information is used as in this WMO ozone and UV bulletin to inform countries about the status of ozone recovery. I'd like to take the opportunity to thank all the countries that are for their effort in maintaining this crucial monitoring activity behind the activity of the MENA Trust Fund. What we do is, in the longer term, to support a strategic plan for ozone and ozone depleting substance monitoring worldwide. We are supporting ozone science through observation, but also analysis, modeling, data stewardship, and capacity building. We work for expanding the observational network. That's not an easy task, especially for ozone depleting substances in areas where data is missing. Additional funding, enhanced collaboration will be needed for that. And then to finish, the scientific experts are preparing the 2026 ozone assessment reports. With that, I thank you very much.
Thank you for the presentation, and thank you all for the updates we got. I would like to go immediately to Finland also for introducing the CRP that was already announced. So please, Finland.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair, and thank you for the presentations, Ravi, Sophia, and also the WMO presentation. Very informative. presentations to start with. So basically, these activities, our submission is about GTF, and it has some elements that are related to the activities which have been done throughout the years by the advisory committee and trust fund, and some are related to the new efforts to have controlled substances on board. And so I go directly to the operational paragraphs, and so it is divided into three. The requests are for the parties of the Vienna Convention, to the Secretariat, and to the Advisory Committee. To start on the request parties, so we suggested the parties decide to recognize that the purpose of General Trust Fund includes supporting activities related to the atmospheric monitoring of substances controlled under Montreal Protocol, also emphasizing in the recommendations of 12th meeting of the Ozone Research Managers, to encourage parties to make contributions to General Trust Fund for financing activities on research and systematic observations related to the Vienna Convention for the purpose of improving both the global ozone observing system and for enhancing the global and regional monitoring of substances controlled by the Montreal Protocol. For the Secretariat, for the request to the Secretariat, for the clarity's sake, we have also included paragraphs that are similar than in the CRP of US and Canada, in the MOP CRP on the US and Canada on the regional monitoring, and these are highlighted in yellow for clarity's sake. And so we request Secretariat to organize work of the Advisory Committee, and then are two paragraphs related to modifying the terms of reference of General Trust Fund and also modifying the terms of reference of the Advisory Committee. And there are references to the earlier TORs in footnote. And then to continue, invite parties and relevant international organizations, including space agencies, scientific and research institutions, United Nations and other institutions, to make financial and or in-kind contributions towards well-defined and well-budgeted project proposals developed under the Trust Fund. To facilitate the receipt of additional funds for the monitoring of controlled substances, to ensure that the management of additional funds referred to under paragraph C adheres to the established financial procedures and reporting requirements, to report to the Conference of the Parties at its 40th meeting on the operation of contributions and to the expenditure on activities funded from the GTF since its inception. And finally, requests to the Advisory Committee, and here again highlighted in yellow in the draft that is also submitted and posted in the website. I think there remains these highlights for clarity's sake, because we expect that these are then discussed once we have finalized in the contact group discussions on the regional monitoring CRP, and then we can think about which elements go into which decision, whether COP or MOP. And so I don't read them through because they are the same as presented earlier in the other. But then point C is to identify gaps and needs in research and monitoring of ozone substances controlled under the Montreal Protocol, as well as related climate variables and parameters, complementing the ongoing efforts of the ozone research managers. Facilitate the relocation of unused Dobson and Brewer instruments, and use of the ozone zone's new observation programs when requested, and foster stronger relationship with scientific institutions and related global networks. And one more on continuing to explore opportunities to leverage and catalyze resources and safeguard necessary research and observation activities. Very much the same which things that were just presented by Professor Ravi Shankara. And I think I stop on that, and thank you.
Thank you, Finland, for introducing the CRP. And my proposal is that this CRP also will be dealt with in the contact group that was already established on atmospheric monitoring. And I think it's important to focus on the highlighted elements of this CRP, as there are the connections between these different CRPs and also the connection to the budget committee. And most of the other items are more or less standard text, so please focus then also on the highlighted elements. Then I see that Australia would like to have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you. I interrupted you prematurely, I think. I'm sorry about that. I thought you may have continued with your stream of thought. We just wanted to provide some brief observations in relation to the reports that have been provided, if that is okay with you, Co-Chair.
Briefly, yes.
Thank you. We don't want to fall behind again on our time. We would just like to very much appreciate the reports that have been provided in relation to the funding and activities of the General Trust Fund for financing activities on research and systematic observations relevant to the Vienna Convention, and particularly appreciate the presentations provided here today from the representative from the Advisory Committee, the Ozone Secretariat, and the WMO. We do note, I think, as Ravi indicated, that while the current work of the GTF is limited in its scope, it does provide valuable support to Article 5 countries for their observations. It broadens the scope of ground-based ozone layer observations and helps contribute to increase the quality of these observations. We noted from Table 2 in the document actually a number of activities which are on hold due to political instability, and we wondered if the Advisory Committee might consider the possibility of cancelling these activities and redirecting those funds to other activities, of course on the understanding that if political situation improves, that those countries can resubmit projects as, you know, if they wish to continue to do so. We also note the significant number of proposed activities listed in Table 3 of the report, and urge the committee to carefully consider the value and benefits of the activities in relation to its mandate and the ORM recommendations. At least on face value to this delegation, some of those activities are probably not consistent with the mandate, but there are other activities which we think would significantly improve ozone observations in some parts of the globe, and we hope that such activities can be funded and go forward. In relation to the implementation of the long-term strategy and short-term plan for action for the GTF, Australia appreciates the summary of progress provided in document 13/7. We note the recommendation of the Advisory Committee to hold a virtual workshop of experts to determine the optimum path for transitioning to new instruments to measure vertical distribution of ozone. And we agree this seems like a really useful exercise to undertake. We don't think that you need our imprimatur to do that. We just do what you need to do in this area. And we also note that the work proposed in paragraph 33 to facilitate the relocation of Dobson or Brewer instruments is a logical piece of global housekeeping. I think you were talking about an audit of Brewer instruments, and this is a logical piece of global housekeeping the Advisory Committee is well placed to undertake. We also agree with the need to maintain and foster relationships, I think, as the speakers and presenters have referred to in their presentations. And then finally, we would like to thank Ecuador, Finland and Indonesia for its CRP, and very happy to work on it in the contact group, recognising its links to issues under negotiation under agenda item 4F. And I apologise to the interpreters for moving a little too quickly, perhaps. Thank you.
Thank you. I have two more speakers on my list, Norway and Kyrgyzstan. And then I would like to close the list. So Norway first.
Thank you, Co-Chair. We thank the representative of the Advisory Committee, the Ozone Secretariat, and WMO for their presentation of the activities performed, as well as the status of the General Trust Fund. We also looked at the meeting documents with interest, and would like to add our voice to the pertinent observation from the delegate of Australia. Also, we were really pleased to see an increase in voluntary contributions since the last COP. This has enabled the implementation of projects that contributed to strengthening ozone monitoring. But still, as we just got presented, the level of available funds remain too low in comparison to the needs for maintaining a robust global ozone monitoring network. We would like to encourage parties to consider providing voluntary contributions, and this in particular in light of our ongoing discussions on extending atmospheric monitoring activities to controlled substances, which is an important purpose that we should pursue. However, it should not undermine the importance of continuing supporting activities towards ozone monitoring. We would like to thank Ecuador, Finland, and Indonesia for presenting a CRP under this agenda item, and we look forward to discussion in the contact group. Thank you.
Thank you. Then Kyrgyzstan, please, you have the floor.
Господин председатель, наша делегация выступает первый раз.
Thank you, Chair. We are taking the floor for the first time. Therefore, we would like to express our thanks to Thailand and to the Secretariat for the excellent way in which our meeting has been organized. We would like to welcome the two reports that we have received on this issue. The status of the General Trust Fund, in particular, which plays a crucial role in leading scientific research in our country in terms of atmospheric monitoring. Kyrgyzstan has received some equipment which is necessary for this, spectrometers in particular, and we have been able to continue our work in the area of atmospheric monitoring. Our monitoring station is already 45 years old, and we therefore have a great deal of experience in terms of the monitoring of these parameters. Now, a look to the future. We will have to work with this new equipment, with new data as well. But we were not present at the last two ozone meetings, and that is most unfortunate because I believe that the reports from our scientists have not been published, and we would like to mention to the Secretariat, the Ozone Secretariat, that we should upgrade or improve the work in this area. In terms of the parties in Article 5, because we now have a new generation of scientists who are coming forward. The former ones are retiring, and we have to take this new situation into account so that we can have cooperation with countries mentioned in Article 5, bearing in mind this new generation of young scientists I mentioned with whom we will have to work. We will have to train them. And the second point I wanted to make, I said a moment ago that our monitoring station is already 45 years old. It is essential for us to be able to collect sufficient volume of data, and a part of this fund could be used to archive data. We have already a number of times mentioned the measurements that are being taken or carried out by these stations. We would like to suggest, because we have Lake Soko in Kyrgyzstan, and we could use this particular place. It's a unique place that will make it possible for us to make observations. It's a mountainous country, Kyrgyzstan, and the monitoring of the stratosphere could well be extremely important. And we could organize here a relocation of an observation station and obtain interesting, useful results. And in these documents, once again, we thank everyone and we wish to participate in the improvement of the stratosphere.
An observation. I would like to address thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. I would like to address the observation by the distinguished delegate of Australia regarding the activities which we have on hold. Yes, indeed. This activity, there are two activities: relocation of Dobson, used Dobson equipment, actually, which instruments which have been on hold for quite a while, and the advisory committee has been considering this very much. At the last meeting, which took place on the 26th of September, the committee decided that we can divert these funds to other activities, but since that meeting was coming, we thought perhaps we can have bilateral discussions with the representatives of these two particular countries before we actually take action. That was but yes, this has been a concern, and we are talking about almost $40,000 US. I don't know if Ravi wants to add something to that or some other points made. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophia. You summarized that extremely well. Thank you for Australia to very directly tell us that we should go ahead with the workshop. Appreciate it. Yeah, should have done that without asking you. And then, anyway, thank you. We really look forward to the CRP from Indonesia, as the other delegate pointed out. But I really appreciated the comments from Kyrgyzstan. The 2 points about it. First is the importance of the younger people who need to be involved in these activities. I would like to make 2 suggestions, observations, if I may. One, absolutely, it is important for them to be involved in doing the science, but also take part in various activities where they will have an opportunity to contribute to the global efforts, assessment activities, modeling activities, data analysis activities, etc. And WMO and other organizations already have archiving capacities, and in fact, one of the we would specifically require people who get resources from the trust fund to deposit their data in the archives, and that way everybody will have an opportunity to look at it and use it. So if there are archiving issues in the country, that's something that we should address. Thank you.
Thank you. So, okay. Yeah,
Just to
Paolo.
complete what my colleague just said about archiving, we are indeed, we have the capacity at WMO and with our contributing networks to archive information. It is important also that people that are involved with data management are trained to connect with the data centers, and this is also something that we can provide at the WMO Go program.
Thank you for your answers, and I would like to go then to the next agenda item. That's AOB. We are almost at the end of this session, so let's see if we can manage to do everything, but depends on everybody. So we go to AOB, and first of all, it was the point put forward by Switzerland on isomers of HFC. So I would like to give the floor to Switzerland, please.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair, for the floor. I will give it back in less than a minute, I promise. As we stated at the time of adoption of the agenda, we see a need to take a look during this meeting at the issue of isomers of HFC not explicitly listed in Annex F of the Montreal Protocol. This issue is described in the information document Inf 6 provided by the Secretariat. We would therefore appreciate if the Secretariat could be in the position to present at this point the main aspects of this document and give further explanations. With that, parties could reflect on it and start their deliberations on it if they wish to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. I see Canada asking for the floor. I don't know if there are other delegations who would like to speak. US. Are there others? Please let me know, and then I give back to the Ozone Secretariat. So Canada and the United States. Please, Canada, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair, and we thank the delegation of Switzerland for raising this issue and for making us aware of this information document, also that the Secretariat has prepared. Having said that, I'm not sure that there's anything that we would be able to do at this meeting, because honestly, this is an issue that was raised in an information document only a couple of days ago. It's quite a complex document. It covers various issues, specifically the issue of isomer HFC 245Cb, but also how to treat other isomers, as well as other issues. And we would need, really more time. Our delegation didn't come prepared to this MOP. It was not on the agenda. We didn't have this document. So we would suggest that this issue be postponed to the next meeting, to the OEWG, if there's an interest by some delegations to discuss this, to allow us to consider fully the complex information that has been put forward. And in postponing the issue to the next meeting, what we understand the main issue that is being raised by this paper is an isomer HFC 245Cb, which does not have a GWP, which the Secretariat indicates would be included as an HFC controlled under the Kegley Amendment. So on that specific issue, perhaps for the next meeting, the Secretariat can prepare a very brief note. I think we're not looking for a complex discussion document, just something briefly that basically explains that. But as for the other issues raised in the paper, I guess, we don't think those necessarily need to come back. I mean, it's an interesting information document, but the issues that relate to HFCs with no commercial uses, we talked about that just last year at OEWG 45, and we had closed our discussion on that issue. the issue of the GWPs to be used for the Kigali Amendment. That was discussed when we were adopting the Kigali Amendment, and I don't think that this is an issue that we want to reopen or discuss. So I think in terms of what issue would be coming back to us for consideration at the next meeting, if that's the way that we go forward with this issue, it's really the new issue of the isomer that the Secretariat has identified, and we would want the Secretariat to limit itself to providing brief information on that matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Canada. Then the United States.
Thank you very much, Mr. Co-Chair. Just to also say thanks to our colleagues from Switzerland for highlighting this issue. I think we find ourselves in a very similar position to what Canada just said. To be honest with you, we didn't actually become aware of the INF document until we had already arrived here. The document itself is, from our perspective, quite extensive and includes a variety of sort of extraneous issues, including laying out various options for action that we wouldn't normally find in an INF document. And so there's really a huge amount to digest here that this delegation is unable at this point to react to. So I think we would support the suggestion by Canada to kick this discussion to next year, focus on the narrow issue, which is the possible import of 245CB and the information related to that, not the policy options, not interpretations of the protocol, but simply present to us the information, and then the parties can think that through. So I think there's a number of items, as Canada mentioned. There's a number of other isomers that are mentioned in this paper. The issue of what GWPs we're using, a legal analysis of options, none of those were actually requested. So I think if we can really focus just on narrow a little bit of information about the issue provided next year, all these other issues are things that the parties need to talk about. And as Canada noted, most of these we've already talked about, some of them several times. So listen, this is new information, so the parties need to be aware of it, but let's just keep this in an information space. And then next year, we will have had time to sort of consider some of this information and the possible complexity that's surrounding it. So support what Canada said, perhaps with my comments, trying to provide a little bit of clarity on how to more appropriately scope this so that if necessary, we can discuss it next year. Thank you.
Thank you. And then I would like to give the Ozone Secretary the opportunity to respond or to give some clarification.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair, distinguished delegates. On the issue of HFC 245CB, the information note prepared by the Secretariat mentions that very recently, in September 2024, the Secretariat became aware of a planned importation of a mixture containing HFC 245CB. This is an isomer of two controlled substances included in Annex F of the Montreal Protocol, namely HFC 245CA with a GWP of 693 and HFC 245FA with a GWP of 1030 in Annex F. In decision 2912 of the meeting of the parties, the assessment panels under the Montreal Protocol were requested to provide in their quadrennial reports information on the consumption and production of HFCs not listed in Annex F, which have a GWP no less than the lowest GWP of the HFCs listed in Annex F for information purposes. The lowest GWP value listed in Annex F is 53 for HFC 152. The Medical and Chemical Technical Options Committee 2022 Assessment Report in response to Decision 2912 indicated that a number of HFCs were not listed in Annex F and have certain values above the threshold of 53, and identified 6 of those as having a known commercial use, including HFC 245CV. MCTOC concluded that parties may wish to consider any actions that they might wish to take concerning those 6 HFCs with known commercial use. The 2022 SAP Assessment Report responded to Decision 2912 by mentioning that 162 HFCs listed in the annex to this report, about 110 species had GWPs above 53. However, the report mentions that since no information was available on the production, consumption, or atmospheric abundance of these compounds, they were not addressed in the assessment. SAP also identified that HFC 245CV has a GWP of 4,510. Considering this information, the Secretariat prepared the information note for parties to consider in case they decide that this issue should be discussed and when parties decide that it should be discussed. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretariat, and also hearing the discussions here in the room. I think it's because this information only became available very shortly before this meeting. And also indicating that, let's say, to come back to this on the 245CB, so the HFC 245CB next time at the OEWG with an inf note, so that the Secretariat can prepare an inf note on that. With that conclusion, I would like to let's say conclude this item. I see Switzerland on my list, so Switzerland, please.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair, and sorry for taking the floor again. I would like to reiterate the importance of this matter. In our review, each party needs full clarity on all substances which are commercially relevant for this party and which are controlled under the Montreal Protocol. As we understand from the No Info 6 document, HFC 245BC is both commercially relevant for at least one party and is controlled under the Montreal Protocol. This means also that parties should have access to all information that is relevant for reporting production and consumption under Article 7. And they should be able to evaluate the effect of this production and consumption on their compliance under the Montreal Protocol. For this, clarity on the GWP of a substance is indispensable. Without that, one or more substances may be omitted in reporting overall, which would lead to emissions of controlled substances being ignored and of the Kigali Amendment being undermined. We recognize, of course, that parties had very little time to prepare domestically for discussion on this matter. It may be therefore challenging to reach any conclusion here at Bangkok at all on the path forward. We nevertheless would see a lot of benefit in exchanging first ideas, maybe in an informal setting or in the margins of this meeting. This could help parties to prepare intersessionally and come to the next OEWG with some previous ideas and maybe good advice on how to proceed. Because some of the options that we understood from the INF6 document are related to some deadlines for when to take action if parties to do so. So with this, I thank you for listening and hope we can have at least some minimum of exchange on this topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We are running over time now, and I see two speakers on my list, Norway and Australia. Please be very brief. Norway.
Thank you, Co-Chair. We think it could be useful to have a better understanding of the implication of this issue, and perhaps that could be helpful to have some informal discussions in the margin, possibly, to figure out what would be the best way forward, the best approach, so that we could facilitate our consideration of this issue at the meeting next year. Thank you.
Australia, please.
Thank you very much, Co-Chair, and I will be brief since we're breaking into our lunchtime. We would just concur with the remarks that have been made by Canada and US about the very short time that we have had here to consider the issues that have been raised in the paper. The paper is quite complex, and we would want to consider deeply the issue of isomers. At the moment, we have 18 very strictly understood HFCs in Annex F, and we think that any changes to that need to be considered very carefully and in depth. And next year, we agree with the proposal from Norway, perhaps for margins discussions, and that might be helpful to facilitate any discussions we have next year. Thank you.
Thank you. And then the last speaker on my list, the EU, and then I would like to concur with my co-chair.
Thank you, Mr. Co-chair. I'll be very brief because having had the exchanges, I think it's correct to say that that party would need certainty on what its, you could say, obligations are. But we also note that there is indeed little time to have absorbed it. We think it would be valuable to get more information from the Secretariat, but if we can start that process already in the margin here, I think that would be welcoming. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Just a brief moment. So I think based on what we heard, there could be informal contacts in the margins or in the corridors to talk about it, and then we come back to this issue. This is how I would like to conclude. And then we can go for lunch, and we also have the contact group that will meet during lunch on screen. So that's the contact group on compliance deferral during lunch. We will have a plenary session this afternoon, but I would like to urge that we have a very short one because we have one AOB point, and then we would like to go to the agenda item 4 on HFC 23 emissions, 4B. And then we would like to continue in contact groups. So have a good lunch
and see you later on this afternoon in also in plenary for a short meeting.